Hello everyone and welcome back to Void Dwarf Studios for our Warhammer Wednesday, another episode on the Lumineth, and this time we explore a pair of twins. No, not those twins. This is Warhammer Fantasy, we're talking about Age of Sigmar. We are of course talking about Ellathor and Ellania, the two elven twins from Ithilien who are the champions of the respective gods, Tyrion and Teclis. Now, despite these being from completely different universes, as it were, they share an awful lot of similarities. Ellathor being a master swordsman of exceptionally crazy skill, considering he's only 50, which for an elf is practically still a teenager, and Ellania being one of the most potent spellcasters in the Lumineth society. Again, sort of ringing some bells here. It's really no wonder that Tyrion and Teclis decided to take them under their wing, probably feeling a great degree of familiarity and nostalgia watching these two run around the realms, causing all kinds of trouble, and generally trying to do things for the right reasons at the very least. However, our story starts with Ithilien, which is unique among the 10 paradises of the realm of Hysh. This is one of the Teclian nations that primarily follow the cultural and teachings of Teclis, but there are some interesting differences. For example, they have a love of magical cloning. Yes. They are a matriarchal society that use magic effectively to clone the greatest and brightest amongst them. Typically, this results in twins, or at the very least duplicates of their, parents and children, meaning that they're sort of just multiplying the good. That's sort of their theory, I suppose. However, in the Age of Myth, there were some serious errors that occurred from this magical cloning process, and now it's heavily regulated and very, very, very carefully managed. Only the very best and brightest are cloned, which is one of the reasons why Ellathor and Ellania were quite unique. Both of them, growing up with relatively normal circumstances, they both grew into incredibly potent fighters and spellcasters. They were quickly outstripping their teachers in terms of what they could be taught. They rose high on the Teclian ladder, and some of their achievements are frankly hilarious, considering that adult elves really struggle with these at the best of times. For example, undertaking the hallucinogenic trial of the Mind Razor, which, in case you had any doubts whatsoever, this could kill you if you don't undertake it with the right kind of mentality. And it's not just these two physical and magical prowess that has made them rather both loved and loathed by the Lumineth around them. The two of them have suggested and recommended changes to each of the 10 paradises in Hysh that have not only been well thought out changes to Lumineth society, but also just basic things that help make these places much more pleasant to live in. Their brilliance has earned them plenty of supporters as much as enemies, as elves, at the best of times, don't like being told what to do or even suggested what might be better, especially from individuals who've only lived 50 cycles. Elves kind of put a bit of a stickler on age equating to intelligence and wisdom, which is very dwarven in a weird roundabout way. So being told by effectively a bunch of teenagers how to run your economy when they have no experience on how to run an economy, even if the teenagers' ideas are quite profound, interesting, and intriguing, probably is a great way to get your hackles up. And these enemies were numerous enough that effectively they decided to leave their homeland, wandering around the various realms, and typically trying to give aid to the various elven peoples across the 9 realms. And it was only when they were banished from their homeland that they came under the watchful eye of Tyrion and Teclis, who took these already exceptional elven beings and honed their skills and trained them to be far, far, far more deadly than they ever could have been alone. And to show their blessings, both Tyrion and Teclis gifted each a weapon, as well as a familiar. That wonderful little owl that hangs around with Ellania is actually a familiar. It gives her a direct link to Selenar, meaning that she's not only in contact with Tyrion and Teclis practically at all times, she's also in contact with Selenar. These two are so blessed, so buffed, that frankly they're a walking, talking dervish of destruction if you get on the wrong side. And really, this is wonderfully reflected in their profile. Ellathor and Ellania, also known as the Eclipsian War Sages, have a respectable 8 wounds, 8 bravery, 3 up save, and a 6-inch move, which is pretty darn good. They act essentially as one unit, they stick together, and each one is perfectly synchronized to fight around the other. The owl familiar that I mentioned allows Ellania to add 1 to casting, dispelling, and unbinding rolls. And because she is of course a wizard, she can cast 2 spells a turn, and she knows the Arcane Bolt, Mystic Shield, and Salvation of Hish. Essentially, Salvation of Hist is cast on 6+, and until the next hero phase, each time you take a wound or mortal wound, you can ignore it on a 5+. That's pretty darn handy, meaning that you have a way to avoid being completely kneecapped by mortal wounds so long as you get this particular spell off. And you can target other units to have this buff too, so, good things all around. And their rule Realm Wanderers means that so long as you have an army that is led by an Order General, you can have these 2 in practically any army of Order. If you wanted to, for now at least, you could in fact have these 2 fighting alongside Daughters of Cain, or Fireslayers, or Caradon Overlords, or Wood Elves, or anyone you particularly fancy, so long as they fit under that Order banner. And, in addition to this, so long as they're within 3 inches of your general, on a 4+, you get an extra command point, which is pretty darn handy. The fun side comes in when we start talking a bit more about Ellathor. Now, Ellathor wields an interesting blade called the Altari, which... just have a listen to this, and for those who know Warhammer Fantasy, ask me if this sounds, familiar. This enchanted blade of awesome power blazes with increasing intensity from the moment it is unsheathed in battle. That's the first ability. The damage characteristic of this weapon is equal to the number of battle rounds. So in your first round, the Altari does 1 damage. Not particularly spectacular. But once we start getting to the 4th round, now you have a weapon that's doing 4 attacks, hitting on 2s, wounding on 3s, -2 rend, and 4 damage apiece. This is a monster-slaying, general-slaying individual if ever there was one. And don't forget, you still have the additional attacks coming from Ellania, the wonderful magical staff that Ellania has, and the owl attacks too, which in total gives you an extra 4 attacks, all hitting and wounding on 3s with -1 rend, and the staff does D3 damage, and the talons do 1 each. So there's a ridiculous amount of damage that can be outputted by these 2, meaning that you can leave them relatively happily murdering their way through, well, anything you feel like. And in addition, once per battle in the shooting phase, you can get Ellathor to unleash a blazing sunbolt. Yes, the light from this weapon becomes so intense you can basically shoot it like a Kamehameha. You pick a target within 12 inches of this model, and you draw an imaginary line. Anything between that point and the model you've targeted, you roll a dice, and on a 2+, each one of them takes a mortal wound. Yikes! That's potentially ridiculously, horribly nasty. If you get it at just the right angle, yeah, that's potentially an entire unit wiped out, especially if it doesn't have a lot of wounds, or any way to prevent it from taking mortal wounds. Yeah, that's all kinds of nasty. But it doesn't stop there. The interesting thing about this sword is when we start talking about the other special rule, sudden translocation. It turns out that this magical weapon Tyrion has gifted this young man is a little unstable, and he needs to be transported away from battles in order to siphon the energy off. This is how it's described. The rule is called sudden translocation, and it states, should Ellathor use Altari for too long, he will start to be overwhelmed by its arcane power, and Ellania will be forced to transport him away from the battle lest he be transformed into a creature of blazing fury. Tyrion, if I didn't know any better, I would say you're drawing upon your past experiences. Don't do that, Tyrion. We don't need another walking, talking avatar of Cain, thank you very much. You caused enough damage in the old world as it was. I wonder if Tyrion has a sense of irony. Maybe he actually wants this guy to fail. Oh well. We'll see. But in any case, what this rule represents is the following. At the end of a combat phase, you have to roll a dice, each time this model has fought in combat. If the roll is less than the number of the current battle rounds, or less than the number of wounds allocated to this model, you heal D6 wounds and remove it from the battlefield. Then, You set this model anywhere on the table, so long as it's 12 inches away from an enemy model. So yeah, basically, if this individual gets whacked once too many times, or rolls on the dice with the battle round, and it's not quite less than the number of battle rounds, then he heals d6 wounds, buggers off, and comes back and starts hitting you over the head again. Yeah, these two are a ridiculously dangerous pair, and that ability to just disappear from the table and come back 12 inches from any enemy does mean that you can effectively drop them in someone's back lines. Say if you're like turn 3 or 4 and people have started moving around a bit, you could pop them somewhere in the back lines and get them to really screw over some artillery or, well, supporting characters, or anyone you particularly fancy dead. Yeah, these two are really, really dangerous, and I'm very curious as to what they're going to do running around the mortal realms just trying to improve everyone around them. They're well known for having a lack of experience, but being exceptionally gifted when it comes to their intelligence. And speaking from reading through the antics of Teclis and Tyrion, that's not necessarily the greatest combination in the world. True, it's particularly handy in a pinch, but yeah, I hope Tyrion doesn't have a sense of irony, because gifting him Altari seems suspicious to me, but we shall see. My best advice is stick this unit with, say, some other Lumineth, as Salvation of Hysh is, well, works perfectly alongside your other Lumineth armies. Otherwise, well, obviously they'd go well with other Order factions, but I think they're just fun wandering around with a Lumineth army, if I'm being honest. I hope you've enjoyed this little video. Thank you so much, everyone, for supporting Void Dwarf Studios. Please check out the Patreon page, as my Patreons make all of this possible. Thank you all those who are supporting me on the YouTube channel. We are 194 subscribers last time I looked, and that's all kinds of amazing. That's fantastic. So thankful and grateful to you all. And I cannot also forget to mention those on Facebook who've been supporting me as well. I will try and keep the content flowing, but if you've had any inkling on my Facebook or Instagram page, you will know that I have an arrival coming in December, and I need to get ready for it as much as possible, both mentally and physically. But I am super excited, and I can't wait for it. I look forward to hearing from you all soon. Until then, take care everyone.